The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Top of the day, I'm Joe Doolittle.
And I'm Kate Dudding.
And this is Story by Story.
Celebrating the human spirit.
And the emphasis is on celebrating. You know, I thought about our title, and I always, somehow we go right by that celebrating. But it's really what we're all about, because, you know, what you celebrate is what you really love and what you really care about. And we really do care a lot about storytelling, you and I.
Well, we certainly spend a lot of our time involved one way or another.
That's one of the measurements. Well, we're going to talk about all we're doing in storytelling in the middle of the show. But I always like to find out what my partner has been doing in the whole area of storytelling since we last sat here together. So what's new in this new year?
Well, something actually I feel really wonderful happened. That a friend of mine, whom I work with on the Proctors Guild, said, my adult son is autistic, and he's in a day program at Wildwood in Latham. And I was talking to his teacher, wondering, could we do something new with them? And storytelling came up. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I could do that. And so I talked to his teacher. We decided on interactive stories that I would tell to elementary school students, but not insisting on participation, but I would invite them. You can do this too. They did. They did. Every single one of them, including the one who didn't often meet my eyes. He was doing something.
They told stories to each other?
No. But when I would say, and the squeaky door, you can do this. Squeak, squeak. And so he would do, maybe a very small hand gesture without any sound, but.
Oh.
And the teacher's supervisor said, I've never seen them react like that. I've been here 30 years, and I've never seen them react like that. We're going to pursue this.
So that was story magic, Kate Dudding. Don't you think?
Yes,
That's
indeed. The power of story is truly amazing.
Wow. I cannot get over that. I
felt it was my Christmas blessing. This was a few days before Christmas that I did that.
I can't top that one. Although I did have a very good friend of mine come and tell stories as the feature at Arthur's Market in the Stockade. And she did a wonderful job. And she was joined by a banjo player from the neighborhood, and it was just one of those wonderful evenings of lighthearted, wonderful stories. Thank you. So there we go.
You're quite welcome.
And I was thinking about one other. I'm in charge of running my 50th college reunion, and
Are you that old?
I am that old.
Sorry.
And it kind of sucks the air out of my days in terms of all things you got to do. And I have a number of classmates who did very well, wonderful things, and two, in the course of their lives, have become very good artists. They were trained in other things, but they've become very good artists. And I wanted painting, yeah. And I wanted to have an exhibit at reunion, but that's a whole logistical thing. And then I was going to send out a note to the class with their website so they could appreciate this. Now, these fellows had written some pieces for a yearbook we're putting together for the reunion about being artists. And I had the fellow in charge of that yearbook send it to me because I figured I'd get some material there. But their stories were so beautifully well done that there was no way I would abridge or borrow, because the way they explained how they found themselves in that artistic expression was just done just right. So I decided that I would not send out that little piece for engagement, that it deserved to be told in its own primary way. So I postponed that story. And with all we know about stories, that's the right thing to do sometimes. But you were brave in your part, taking those stories and risking getting the kids to not respond to you. They responded to you. That was wonderful.
Well, I volunteer at 2 nursing homes quite near my house, and they're both Alzheimer's units. And so I've been doing this for, I don't know, at least 5 years. So I'm kind of used to people not reacting. In one, they're severely withdrawn, and I'm considered stimulation. So I never ask, if I have occasionally shared these stories, but I don't ask, say, you can do this, because I know
It wouldn't work. Yeah.
that, though they do sing. They do sing old-timey songs with me, or mouth the words.
So the shared learning about stories is that, like Marshall McLuhan, that academic communicator described years ago, sometimes the medium is the message. Sometimes the story in and of itself is the message that stimulates the mind and hearts of tellers and listeners.
And they laughed too. I mean, they weren't just physically mimicking. They were listening, and the supervisor asked a question: which story did you like best, or what did you think that last story meant? And it was Master of All Masters, when a new someone who has just hired a young girl to work on his farm decides, lets the power go to his head, and said, you can call me Master of All Masters, and call the cot the barnacle, and call my pants squibs and crackers. And so he keeps on coming up with all these, but oh yes, so I could decide this. And so the fellow who didn't make much eye contact said, that last story meant just say what you mean. Don't muck around.
Don't muck around. Don't muck around.
And I'd never put it quite so succinctly. that message. So I mean, he.
That's a really good story in itself, Kate. Thank you. We have a guest storyteller today that I think our audience is going to appreciate and love, because from what I've known of her, she's kind of one of those multifaceted storytellers. She sings, she tells stories, she's very personable, and she's going to be able to share some things that maybe you and I don't even know yet. Do you think about that?
Oh, I'm always surprised here. I look forward to being surprised.
Who is our guest?
Eileen Egan Mack.
You're right. She's right here. Hello. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well. Thanks so much for. People don't realize all that you do. You are the producers, and I don't know your workload, but I can see why when I was scanning the Albany Times-Union the other day, Faces of 2016, and I go, oh my gosh, there's a face I know.
It's our Kate right there.
Our Kate right there. And a lot of these people are ministers or in religious and work in faith, and but under Kate's name it says storyteller webmaster, and it deserves, that was perfect placement. But although it says Faces of 2016, it's really the Voices of 2016. And so thank you for having your voice out there. I was just very proud when I saw that on the Faith and Values page, because storytelling is a place for us to think about our faith and our values.
Now, tell us just a little bit more about how you got to be a storyteller, because I was thinking about that, and I'm not sure that I can remember how that happened.
Not sure if I remember either.
Oh, there we go. Well, that was a good question, Joe.
Speaking of the Alzheimer's unit,
Yeah. Well, my mother was a librarian, but prior to becoming a librarian, she'd been a drama major at SUNY Albany. Went to school for free, and so she always loved telling us stories, and Irene the Idol, and some really just ridiculous stories. But so I think like it was just kind of there, and I became a speech therapist, and I don't know, just stories are there. And I didn't really consider myself a storyteller. I don't know, I feel like I'm still a beginning storyteller, but.
But you have this long program on Jean Robert Foster. So for not being a storyteller and having like an hour program, are there anything that connects those two dots in your bio?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened. I bought this book called Adirondack Portraits, A Piece of Time, to give to the museum director where I worked. It was her birthday, but I never did end up giving it to her because I started reading the stories, and then I started reading them out loud, because to me they were stories that you needed to hear. They work so much better if you give them voice. And so I thought, well, how can I get them out there? So I started working on how can I put this together, and I got some advice from different people, Bob Petty at Pendragon Theater and some other people, and I just felt compelled to do it. And then he said I had to do it in the first person, which was I didn't want to do that, be her, but he was really right. That's the best way to get the stories out there. Instead of, she did this, she did that, having the first person makes it stronger and more authentic, really, I guess. So that's how I came to know and love Jean Robert Foster, and then it turned out I knew all these other connections. I knew Richard Launderville and Janice Huddleston Launderville. They are her biographers. I went to school with Janice, and Mr. Launderville had taught at our school, but then went to Potsdam. So, and my mom knew Bill Murphy, who Jean Foster helped. He had just written his doctorate, and turns out somebody else came out with the same thesis. So he had to start all over again. And Jean was working for the Municipal Housing Authority in Schenectady, and Bill Murphy was a professor at Union College, but also on the city council. And so she offered him all her papers that belonged to John Butler Yeats, the father of William Butler Yeats. So he wrote The Prodigal Father about John Butler Yeats, who never did get to go home. He died here in New York City, and the family couldn't afford to have him shipped back to Ireland. So Jean took care of it and buried him in the Foster family plot in Chestertown on Route 9, just south of Chestertown. So you can go visit the gravesite, and people do, to visit him and to visit her.
Wow.
So Jean, I'm going to help you into the next part, I think. Jean always said that when she came back, when she was resurrected, she wanted to come back as a tree. So I had been thinking, well, if I could start to develop a genre of storytelling, an area, could I start to learn stories about trees? So I've slowly been trying to work on that. And in that vein, I came across stories about trees in this series of books, Keepers of the Animals, Keepers of the Earth, Keepers of Life, and there's one other one that I don't have. And they're all by Michael Caduto and Joseph Bruchac, with the illustrations by John Keonis Fadden. And I taught school with John Fadden.
Oh, really?
He was an art teacher at Saranac Central. His father, Ray, had been an art teacher at, and they started the Antioquia Indian Museum, and they are great storytellers. And so I brought these books because if you haven't heard of them, and you are a teacher or a lover of story, or you want your students to become storytellers, the stories are usually pretty short so that a child could learn them pretty easily. And after each story, there's a whole section for the teacher with science background and lesson plans and activities that are really their own outdoor education curriculum right here in these there's actually 4 books. So
Now, are they Native American stories?
They're all Native American stories from all over North America. And the illustrations are beautiful, and the forewords are amazing, and I actually haven't even read them all cover to cover, but I highly recommend them. So that's where my first story comes from.
Are you going to tell us your first story?
If you're ready.
Yeah.
I think we're ready.
All right. So I'll move this out of the way. Long, long ago, Gichigumi had created a beautiful world where the people could gather berries and find animals and till the soil and grow food that they needed. It was bountiful and it was beautiful. But he wanted to send one of his helpers to check and see how everybody was doing, how the people were doing on the earth. So he sent Monobozo down, and Monobozo came and looked at the beautiful vistas, the trees and the mountains and the valleys and the rivers, and he too was taken by the beauty of the place. But when he went to the village of the people that he was coming to see, there was nobody there. Their dwellings were empty. The place was quiet. Where could everybody have gone? So he started walking through the woods, and he didn't see anybody hoeing and didn't hear anybody out, the women gathering, chattering as they would be gathering the berries. It was quiet. Not the right kind of quiet, though. As he made his way into this beautiful grove of maple trees, he looked down, and there all the people were. They were lying on the ground. Because in those days, one of the gifts that had been given to the people was the gift of maple sap. All you had to do was break a twig off the tree, and the maple sap would start flowing. The people knew that. So they had broken off the twigs, and they were laying on the ground, just taking in all that maple sap. Oh, it was so good and so sweet and so delicious. There was no need to move. There was no need to get up and do anything. There was no need to tend the children or sit and sew the beautiful moccasins or repair the wigwams that might need fixing. They were there just taking in the maple sap. Monobozo knew this was wrong. This isn't right. People need to work, and they need to care for each other, and they need to talk to each other, and they need to build community. And so he went back to the village, and there gathered some of the beautiful birch bark baskets that had been made that hadn't rotted out yet, and took them to the river. And basket after basketful, he poured onto all those trees more and more water, thinning out the maple syrup, creating a maple sap that now flowed easier and more quickly, but didn't have the sweetness to it, didn't have the thickness, so that if people could still have the maple syrup, but now they would have to gather it in baskets and bring it and put it in other baskets and heat up stones, gather the wood, bring the wood in, heat up stones, and put the stones in the maple sap until it boiled and boiled and boiled, and the sap evaporated. And after much working, and this wasn't something you could do by yourself, everyone had to join in together. Everyone had to bring the wood. Everyone had to bring the stones to be heated. Everybody had to gather the sap, and they had to work together as community and take care of each other while the sap boiled away, and then eventually left them with that sweet tasting maple syrup that now they valued in a different way because they had earned it, and they had worked together, and they had stories to tell about, oh, last year when we made the sap, do you remember how this happened or that happened? And that's the story how we came from having maple syrup coming out of our maple trees to it being the maple sap that we have to work a little harder for.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I was thinking, maple syrup, the original drug.
Well, that's what I thought when I maybe not when I first read this story, but now when we think about, meth houses and we think about the opiate addictions that are out there that people unwittingly fall into, you don't even realize maybe that this is happening. I'm sure. So when you think about that story, it is like they're addicted, and they've lost their work ethic, and they've lost family, and they've lost touch with one another. But now if they want it, they have to work at it. So I don't know, I see a lot of lessons and parallels, and it's not a story that could ever go out of fashion or out of usefulness.
Now, talking about coincidences, you mentioned Ray Fadden, and that reminded me of Fran Yardley, because she tells the story of when Ray adopted a porcupine.
Oh, that's a very funny story.
Yes. And
Why would you adopt a porcupine?
well, it needed help.
Oh, what do you know?
Okay, and he house trained him, and that's where the humor lies in that story. But that's another story.
I was thinking it was a skunk, but I'm not sure.
A skunk?
Maybe a skunk.
Okay, it's
Either way, it was pretty daring to adopt this animal.
Right. It was not the normal, anyways, and then I remember Fran Yardley saying, you have to read a lot of stories to find one that you want to tell. Like making maple syrup. You start with 40 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup.
One story, yeah.
So,
Good analogy.
so, but you found Jean Robert Foster. I have such a hard time remembering those 3 names in the right order. Her story just grabbed you, as did the stories here. Now, you weren't an environmental educator. No, you said
No, I was a
therapy.
speech therapist, but I did. There's a thing called Project Learning Tree that's sponsored by the Department of Environmental Conservation, New York State DEC, and they trained trainers. So I did get to train as a trainer for Project Learning Tree, and that's another terrific resource. I called about a year ago to the DEC to see if it was still even out there, and apparently it is. But there was sort of like this golden time of arts and education back in the 80s and maybe somewhat into the 90s. And I see it kind of as part of that, but it is still out there and people can still get training, and they had wonderful resources, books with all kinds of curriculum information and stories and activities. And so if anybody's interested in looking into that, contact the DEC, because they tell me it's still out there. Because I wondered if they were still looking for people to come in and either train the trainers or whatever, but yeah.
And so, in a way, Jean Robert Foster is still finding you, because you really got interested in trees because of part of her story of wanting to come back as a tree.
Well, I was trying to think of how I could maybe connect the two, and I think what I found is that, well, my goal was to also get people to realize that they have a connection with trees, whether they realize it or not. And so through the Story Circle of the Capital District, I got to go to the Adirondack Museum this fall in Blue Mountain Lake and take part in their Taco Day. Ole? No, not wrong kind of taco. It's Take a Child Outdoors Day.
Oh.
Take a Child Outdoors Day.
Yeah, and they had Native Americans come, and I'm not sure what they did because I really didn't get to see anybody else's participation, but there was somebody there working with the children on water, and I got to do a presentation on trees, and every presentation I did was a little bit different. I don't know, I'm just kind of feeling my way through it, and I told different stories. But the thing that every group had in common was every child got a tree cookie. A tree cookie is just, my friend in Vermont did this for me, God love her. She, you slice up a tree, a little sapling, and then you get a little round slice of tree that it looks like a cookie. And then I got somebody to show me how to use the drill and drill holes, because I'm kind of challenged in that way, and then put a piece of yarn on each one. And then I told a story about a tree in my life. And the story, maybe this is the story I'll tell. When I was a kid, we had trees in our yard. We were very lucky. I lived in the village of Ballston Lake, and it wasn't just a development where at those times most of the developments didn't have any trees because everything was new in the 50s. And but we had old trees because we had an old house. And next to our house was a cherry tree. And we learned to climb that tree because the branches were low enough that you could get a hold of it and boost yourself up and climb up. And could swing on it. And at one point, we were walking down the hill, coming back, I think from the library, because you could still, you know, it's a nice village, you could walk to things in the village. And there was a cat out there. And the cat, you know, came up and was trying to make friends with us. And my sister Tracy is particularly an animal person. I am not, but I was still interested in the cat. And so we brought the cat home. And Dad's not going to let us keep this cat. He wouldn't have us have a cat or a dog or anything. Until I was in my 40s, I always thought my dad hated dogs, but it turns out that he had a dog when he was a kid named Shep, and Shep followed him everywhere, and Shep got hit by a car when cars were just being, you know, introduced in the area, and so it was more like he didn't want to have his heart broken again. So we brought the cat home, and we decided that we would tell our father that we had a present for him.
Whoa.
So we heard his feet coming down the sidewalk, you know, and the door opens and the footstep in the door. Dad, look what we've got. We've got a present for you. And he looked at us and he knew, somehow he knew, it's a cat. It was a cat. Her name was Mischief, and she had many litters of kittens. And what Mischief learned to do, and she taught Asta, the other cat that we kept for, you know, Asta I think we had for 18 or 20 years. Mischief we had for 18 or 20 years. Mischief and Asta liked that tree that we learned to climb too. Mischief learned to climb up the tree, go out on a branch, jump on the roof of the house, of the upstairs over the kitchen room, we called it, and walk across and down onto the roof outside our bedroom window. And come to the window and meow, and we'd go and open the window and let her in. And Asta learned to do the same thing in winter, spring, summer, or fall. I mean, the winter that we'd open the window and Asta would jump in and shake the snow off and pad his way over and climb up onto Tracy's, not my bed, and clean himself off and curl up and go to sleep. And so on my tree cookie, I drew a picture of my house with a tree and a cat, because that's one of the trees in my stories in my life. And then got every kid to come up with a tree story, to realize that they also had a relationship with the tree. And they were fabulous. They're fabulous stories that we're hearing, and those were just kind of the kernel. So I was hoping that when the kids went back from the museum, that then they would go back to their classroom and with their teacher, learn the story and elaborate and make it a little bit longer and get on the path of storytelling. So that was kind of a connection from trees, and then trying to carry that on. So I don't know how much time we have left.
We're just about halfway through, so we'll take a break here, and I'll go over coming events.
Well, and maybe one of the things we could talk about as the first event is the Story Sunday that's coming up on January. Oh, it's February.
February 12th.
February 12th. And that's really drawn from the Adirondacks because you've teamed up with Dan Berggren, who's a wonderful musician, folklorist, whatever, and yourself to really talk about stories from the mountains or of the mountains?
Voice of the Mountains.
Voices of the Mountains.
So we kind of took what was my show, and I call it my show, but it's very loosely my show because I started with a folk song that I thought was by Sally Rogers, but it's by Cy Kahn. And then, depending on what version I do, there are folk songs in it. And many years ago, I asked Dan if he would come and do the show with me so that I could have the male voice for some of the male parts, and that he could sing some of the songs. So we've done it about, 3 or 4 times, and it's just magical because to me, Dan Berggren is the kind of person that wherever he goes, all of a sudden he creates sacred space. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to get to do this show with him, because when we do the show, we're always talking to the audience. We don't, it's not like this kind of back and forth. It might be a little eye contact, but so anyway, it's stories about Jean Rada Foster. It's some readings from her, and then it's music from the mountains too. So it's a really beautiful show, and we haven't parsed out how we're going to divide it up and create our breaks, because with this, there's storytelling, right? And then people have an opportunity to dine.
Yeah, you have 4 courses of storytelling interwoven with 3 courses of food.
Okay.
So roughly 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and 40 minutes. Actually, we don't have to be going over these. Anyways,
Right.
and then
want
just
to know how it works.
something at the end, maybe like in this case, maybe one more song.
But it's going to be a great evening for those of you who are out there who are thinking about how do you get closer to storytelling, and this would be one of those times. And it's a great evening, and it'll be one of our better evenings for the whole series, just because of you and Dan, I'm sure.
And great food too, right?
Yeah.
Great food, great
Yes.
food.
Because it's at the Glenn Sanders
Mansion, exactly.
And what else do we have going?
Okay, well, let's go back to the beginning of the month
Oh.
now. And we have you on Sunday, February 5th at 7 p.m. at Arthur's Market and Historic Coffee House. Oops, I didn't spell
Yep.
coffee right, did I?
And with David Cornelius as part of Light Up the Stockade, which is a commemoration of the massacre of Schenectady in 1690. And the emphasis will be on some of the roles that the Native Americans played, the Mohawks particularly, in being friends at that time. And David Cornelius is a Mohawk. So that's kind of a good thing. So.
Okay. And then next, chronologically, we have you again. Oh my goodness. On 2 days later, on Tuesday the 7th, you will be telling stories with Audrey Seidman as part of the Interfaith Story Circle of the Capital District's monthly programs. Love stories from the LGBTQ community and friends.
Which will be a most interesting program, and many of you may not know, but I'm an advocate for the gay lesbian community in terms of some of the things that my wife and I have done, and so I was asked to kind of help Audrey do that set, and we're going to have fun with it, and we're going to be reviewing it just after the session is taped at Professor Javis today.
Oh, yeah.
I went too fast.
We're in a little time warp
All
here.
right.
Today is January 10th.
Right.
But we're filming our February program.
Sorry about that.
So he'll be planning something that we just were talking about doing. Okay. Phew. But, oh, right. And then the next night, it's always the second Wednesday of the month for the Saratoga Storytelling Open Mic. So this month it's the 8th, the earliest it could possibly be, up at Wesley Commons on Wednesday, February 8th at 7 o'clock. And it's free when we're at there. They're located behind hospice.
Yes, and it's a wonderful place to tell. So we have a good time there.
And we get
Sellers.
about 40, 50 people there.
Yeah, it's good.
Some who live there, and then others from the community who come in. So it's an open mic. Come early to sign up.
Woodlawn Commons, right?
Yes.
Woodlawn.
Yes. Okay. Excuse me. And then Friday of that week in Albany, part of the Shawnee Evenings series at the Irish American Heritage Museum, we have For the Love of Irish Stories with Lorraine Harton-Gilardi and Karen Pillsworth. Two wonderful storytellers from a little down the Hudson Valley.
From Kingston.
Kingston, and Lorraine now lives in Beacon or Newburgh.
She's moved a little south, yeah.
Yeah. So they're delightful storytellers.
And that's a wonderful setting as well. And you have Irish soda bread and thick butter at intermission and deep, dark coffee. Or tea. It's a wonderful intermission. So.
Then the next week, on the second Tuesday of the month, we have the first Tuesday Tales and Stuff, because Joe tries very hard, but he can only be one place at a time.
That's right.
And so if he was telling for the Interfaith Story Circle meeting, he could not be at First Tuesday Tales and Stuff. And the theme there will be love stories.
Since it is Valentine's Day.
Since it is Valentine's.
Right.
That's sort of a no-brainer.
So bring your stories.
Let's talk about caves. No.
Bring your stories and share your stories at Arthur's.
Then the next night, we have the Story Circle meeting, at the Pine Hills Branch Library. We'll have some sort of a learning session at 6:15, and then at 7 to 9 we'll have sharing of stories under development, and you can have feedback or not, depending on your druthers. And we do ask you to tell and not read, though you could have an outline to refer to. But we don't want your face stuck in the, because storytelling is when you're looking into people's eyes and you see that they understand what you just said, and it's a very wonderful.
And some of the opportunities here are performance opportunities where there's a feature or features and tellers and listeners, but the storytelling meeting is really designed to encourage new folks into the circle to begin to tell in a public way, but perhaps not a performance way.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you just want to listen to stories, if you've got really bad cabin fever, and come and listen to some stories. Even an emerging story is really interesting to listen to. Then on Friday of that week, the 17th, Janet Carter has a series at the Inquiring Minds bookstore in Saugerties. She and a guest will be telling that night. Then at the end of the month, on Sunday, February 26th, I'm Still Here is the title of our wordplay at Proctor's, where we have 6 tellers, including Eileen Egan Mack, telling a story that resonates with that title, I'm Still Here.
That's quite a busy month.
Yes. And again, if you're suffering from cabin fever, you can always go to our website, storycircleatproctors.org, and click on YouTube, where you can get over 150 stories on demand. This is one of the undervalued parts of YouTube.
Right.
And there are no cats. I'm sorry. No cute cats.
No meow.
That's another place. But so those are the coming attractions.
Right. That's a full month, but it's full because there's people that seem to like to tell and like to listen. So we hope that you can be counted in those numbers this month of February. Mm-hmm. Eileen, give us a little bit more background on your singing, because I know that you sing as part of some of your storytelling presentations, but I've also heard you sing with kind of jazz bands and those kinds of things. What's the story behind you coming into vocal presence musically? How did that happen?
I think I just always loved to sing. In fact, when I go out and I sing in nursing homes, I try to teach them one of the songs I learned in kindergarten from Mrs. Hartman. I remember standing behind her, singing as loud as I could, Flag of America, red, white, and blue. Flag of America, a salute we give to you. So, my mom liked to sing. She tried to get us to sing in the car, probably to keep the 4 girls from fighting. But that's how I kind of learned to do harmony, too. But we had, a good music program at Burn Hills, Ballston Lake Schools, which I believe is still I'm sure it's even better than it ever was. I talked to a music teacher from there recently. So there were opportunities. I sang in the church choir as a child, sang with Miss Knapp, Mrs. Bunnicky in elementary school, sang in junior high and high school, and
I'm impressed that you can remember all the names of these teachers. That's kind of
Oh yeah, I could name all my elementary school teachers and gym teachers. Yeah, it was a good school district, and I've just kept it going. And when it's not in my life, it's like sad. It's like when you don't have a good book to read, only worse. And so I've met some wonderful people. So when I moved down here, back because I lived in Plattsburgh for most of my adult life, and so I've sung in rock bands and folk rock bands and jazz groups, and so anyway, I met Peg Delaney, and so that's how I met her at Jazz Vespers at the First Reformed Church. Jazz Vespers every Sunday, 5 o'clock. It's free, and it's wonderful jazz music, always with a pianist. And so I met Peg. It turns out Peg and her husband Bill had gone to Plattsburgh State. He graduated the same day I did, but we never knew each other, even though I was in the music, but I was in the, college chorale, and they were instrumentalists. And so I've gotten to work with her, and then Steve Zucchini from the Zucchini Brothers. I had known him when he lived up in Plattsburgh. In fact, I introduced him to his wife, Maggie Bettino, and at their wedding, I got to sing Dan Berggrun's song, Love is Like a Song, which, if we have time at the end, there may be a reason to reference that song. But that was way before I knew Dan Berggrun. I never knew I would know him. He came to the coffee house in Plattsburgh at Palmer Street Coffee House, and I would go to the coffee house to see whoever was playing. And he's up there. I never heard of him, and he's got this book that he's reading from. And I go, "Oh my God, it's the book!" It was Adirondack Portraits: A Piece of Time, and that's how I first met Dan.
Fun.
Anyway.
I see your life is all these connections and these lines are coming around.
Where are they leading me to? I don't know, but here I am with you today.
This is a digression. I needed an opener for my a cappella college group, the alumni that were singing, and we were in Lake George. So I got Dan to do the opening, and he sang with the a cappella group at St. Lawrence, which
So did my son.
which drew a number of people to this performance. And so he did the opening, and he did this one about his migraine sweater, which everybody still sings in the group when we meet.
Which is on our website on demand.
Which is on our website.
Yeah, because he's been sitting in that chair.
And then we gave him a maroon and white tie. That was our going away to get him. He was finished. So we made him an honorary member. But I've had more fun with Dan Berggrun too. It hasn't involved any maple syrup or anything. But so
We have about 17 minutes left. I know you have at least one more story to share with us. So let's be sure to get that in, because we could chit-chat until tomorrow's, but we'll try to focus.
It's so fun when you get together. I know my sister's into horses, and when she talks with people about horses, it's like they're speaking another language, So it's really nice to get and sit and talk with you about storytelling and the whole thing. So the story that I'm going to tell is an adaptation of a children's book called The Loudest Noise in the World by Benjamin Elkin, I think is his name. And it was written in 1954. And when I found this book at Cadyville School Library, it was like, oh, this is a perfect book for May, because May is Better Hearing and Speech Month. And having been a speech therapist, you try to do a little PR about that, which is partly about protecting your hearing and partly about communication and communication skills. So anyway, that's how I found the story and how I first got to use it. And now, to me, it makes sense for other reasons. I recently heard a podcast with Krista Tippett and her radio show called On Being, and she was interviewing a guy named Gordon Hempton, who was an acoustic ecologist. So he's out there listening in the world, recording the sounds in the world, and trying to get us to come to understand that. We've saved places for habitat, and we've saved places so that there's not light pollution, but noise pollution. And he has researched, and there are only 12 places in all of North America where for 15 minutes you could have a sustained silence. And of course, when I say silence, I don't mean the non-sound, just that there's no human noise. Only 15 places, which is another reason why right now the DEC and the governor are considering how to designate new lands in the Adirondacks that have been acquired by the state, the Boreas ponds. And another reason why they need to keep areas motor-free. So a little campaign, a little soapbox. But that's how this story ties in with a lot of things that I care about. Well, you know that every place you go, cities are known for certain things. Like New York City, the Big Apple is known for the Empire State Building and Central Park. San Francisco is known for its trolleys and its views of San Francisco Bay. Albany's known because the legislature's there, and we now know it and recognize it as a place where Alexander Hamilton spent a lot of time. So that makes Albany special. But this story takes place in a city a kingdom actually, where it was known for its noise. It was the city and kingdom of hubbub. Yes, the kingdom of hubbub. And it was ruled by a king, and every place in hubbub, the doors were the slammiest, the cars were the honkiest, the pots and pans were the bangiest, the voices were the loudest, the doors were the slammiest. And the king's youngest son loved with his friends banging their pots and making as much noise as they could, because that was the challenge of living in hubbub. What else can you add to the noise of hubbub every day? Well, as it turns out, Prince Hullabaloo was his name, was about to celebrate his 6th birthday. And the king was trying to figure out what to get him for his birthday. And he would ask his son, well, do you want a new set of marbles? No, didn't want marbles. How about a new... And he went through a list after list. He even offered to get his son a horse, a pony. But that was not what the prince wanted. So the prince, too, was thinking about what he wanted. And one day, as he was playing with his friends, he realized, I've got it! He shouted, because you're in hubbub and you've got to shout. I want to make, on my birthday, the loudest noise in the world. And he went to his father and he told him, Father, I know what I want to do. I want to have the loudest noise in the world. Well, what would that mean? Well, the king and his counselors got together and they talked and they yelled and they shouted and they thought as best you could with all that hubbub going on. And they decided to send out notices far and wide that on the prince's birthday at 12 o'clock noon, everybody would join together and they would bang their bangiest pots and pans, and the car horns would beep, and the people would shout as loud as they could. And make as much noise as they would, and they sent out messengers far and wide. And as the day approached, people were talking and planning and figuring out what they were going to do to make the prince's birthday the happiest birthday he could possibly have. So the day drew near, and the prince was set to be out on the balcony of the castle. And the people gathered in the town square. Hundreds and hundreds of people gathered and coming to celebrate and make the noise. But one of the men in the town had said to his buddy, I'm not really going to make any noise. Well, how can you not make noise? The prince will be sad if you don't. I want to hear what it sounds like, said the man. And the man went off with that information and told his wife. Well, you never know what happens when people get an idea and it starts to spread. But that day they arrived in the town square, and the prince was up on the balcony of the beautiful castle. And as they looked up, they could see the prince, and they could see the king standing nearby, and all his counselors. And there was the beautiful castle, and behind the castle was this beautiful woods, this beautiful forest. It was a wonderful setting for the prince to have to celebrate his birthday. So the prince went out, and the people were cheering and waving, and he waved. And the hands on the clock got closer and closer and closer and closer. And just as it got to be 12 o'clock, everybody was set for the loudest screaming, the bangest, the slammiest doors, the cars honking. And as it got there closer, all of a sudden the whole city of hubbub went quiet. Everybody had stopped. They too wanted to hear what it was going to sound like to have the noisiest sound in the whole world. And as they stopped breathing. And from those woods behind the castle, you could hear tickety-dee-dee. Well, the prince's ears perked up, and a big smile came across his face. He had never heard a bird in the quiet making its song. Now, the birds don't make their songs for us. We know that. But we do enjoy it, and we do hear it kind of as the music in the world. And you could see the people down in the courtyard. At first they were afraid because they didn't want the prince to burst into tears and cry because he didn't get the noisiest noise in the world. He got silence with just the sound of the world. And they all stood there and listened. And they could hear the wind coming through the trees. And the people in the court down in the village square turned to each other. And they smiled, and they nodded, and they hugged one another. And they whispered in soft whispers and quiet voices. Isn't this wonderful? Can you believe it? The prince is happy. We're hearing the birds. And they all quietly went arm in arm, quietly, softly padding to their house. Not a car horn was sound, not a bang was crashed. And when they closed the doors, the slamiest doors were closed quietly in the door frames, so that at the end you could even hear the latch click. And from then on, the city of Hubbub was known for being a soft-spoken, quiet place where people could hear the birds, and they could hear one another and listen and be happy in the city of Hubbub. Or something like that.
Great, great, great.
Sort of quiet clapping.
Okay.
That was just super, and I followed it all, so the power of this silence was actually gossip. Is that the?
Well,
Yeah,
everybody got the idea.
Once gossip gets out there, it just travels.
Well, good ideas, sometimes good ideas spread like wildfire. And I don't think they meant to hurt the prince's feelings, and nobody thought that everybody would join in and just.
And you do a nice chickadee. And,
yes.
and
a woodpecker.
A woodpecker. The other one I've heard, but I couldn't remember.
I don't know. I just kind of made
just-
it up. Maybe it's a wood thrush. And when you tell it different times, it comes out different ways. Like, I don't know. But then, yes. So when you probably want to know what happened to the prince when he grew up.
Yeah.
Yes. What happened to the
I
prince when
believe
grew
he became an ornithologist and specialized in bird songs.
Very good. That's a wonderful little P.S. on the bottom of that. The prince became a birder.
A professional birder.
Went out on Christmas Day and did a count.
Yes, right.
Now, when you were telling that, when it was in the hubbub, I remember visiting my son at college, and we went to a snack bar to get some food, except they had a TV blaring, and they had music going, and they kept on calling out, "Order number 12, it's ready." It was like,
I know. The acoustic environments that we create are they really kind of work against what we really need. I mean, because even if, you go out and you try to have a conversation, and you actually can't. So it's keeping people from communicating with one another. And if you get any kind of a hearing loss, which loud noises and all the earbuds are the worst, because there's not even enough space for the sound to get a chance to soften before it hits your your eardrum, your tympanic membrane. And so we're going to see lots and lots more of young people, and I think we already are with hearing issues.
it's a good thing they can text.
I guess, but
They'll be texting to each other.
you don't know the tone of voice or anything.
Yeah,
You're missing that.
Oh, right, yeah, because emails are fine to deliver facts, but once you get into a discussion, you can't, as you said, the tone of voice, and it goes downhill real quick. That you should. I've participated in a couple, and it's like, no, we need to be face to face. And if I say something that you don't like, you can immediately react, and we don't get off in. Yeah, we can
misinterpretation or something.
Oh, or I can say, "Oh, I see you really care about this. Oh, gee, I think you care about this more than I do. You know, you can't, the email is like set in stone.
Yeah,
Anyways,
or the
I
text.
digress. That's a
But it's true, and as far as all the noise that we make, we interfere with wildlife. I mean, and even in the ocean. I mean, that's
Right.
we're interfering with how the animals are communicating. They can't
All that sonar. Yeah.
get their sonar out to one another, and so I think we really do need to take some responsibility for being aware that we are contributing. There's noise pollution. There is noise pollution, and that it does impact not just human beings and our well-being. And I do believe it's our well-being, but the animals that we, in a way, we're responsible for too. So, anyway, so let's. This guy Gordon Hempton, who Krista Tippett did the interview with on Being, he's campaigning for there to be a designation of quiet places. And he thought maybe in 2016, with it being the National Parks Centennial, that something might happen. But I don't believe anything did. So,
But yes, motorboats and snowmobiles. It really, to me, it really blasts away the pristine beauty of places in the Adirondacks.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then, but even if you can't ever get to the Adirondacks, don't we deserve to have some quiet places? And I guess that's why concert halls and churches are still kind of sanctuaries for that.
Yeah, I've always had an affinity to churches, even though I'm not a member of any church anymore. But the buildings, and maybe the silence is part of it.
And Gordon Hempton talked about that too. But then you think about also like meditation. I mean, people are getting more aware of meditation and the benefits for your brain and for your spirit and your emotional well-being too. And even if you are in a quiet place and you're trying to meditate, there's still that mind chatter, which is noise. If it's, you don't hear it, but it's there. So, when you do try to learn to meditate, you try to have other awareness of other things like your breath or a mantra that you're saying, so that the thoughts that do come, you can see that they're there and then let them go, and it's not constantly retelling of the story that going around in your head that kind of drives you crazy. So creating your own silence in your own brain.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. Our time is up. We
really?
have to say goodbye.
Well,
Goodbye.
we'll see you next month, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round